That it was up here
Okay,
already.
very good. Welcome, everybody. It's 1 o'clock, so we'll start our meeting. It's a combined meeting with the Tax Exempt Review Committee in the Renaissance Zone, and it's also the first time we've done this, so there's a few moving parts, so I appreciate your patience. If you don't mind, real quick, we'll start at that end and introduce yourself. And John, welcome. You're our newest member to the Tax Exempt Review Committee, so thank you for joining us. But if you don't mind starting us off, and then we'll just kind of introduce everybody.
Well, thank you, Commissioner. Happy to be here. It's been a number of years since I've served on a tax exempt review committee, but my old friend Mayor Furness is over there. He promised to guide me through this and re-indoctrinate me. So look forward to making some good decisions for the benefit of the city and the benefit of the citizens.
Hello, I'm Jessica Ebling from Gate City Bank.
Good afternoon, I'm Jim Boos.
I am Kent Costin, Director of Finance for City of Fargo.
I'm Bruce Grubb, Fargo City Administrator.
Hey, Granberg City Commission.
Dave Pepcorn, Fargo City Commission.
Tim Mahoney, Mayor of Fargo.
Deb Mathern, Renaissance Zone Authority.
Bruce Furness, Renaissance Zone Authority.
Chad Peterson, Cass County Commission.
Dean Bershani from NDSU.
Carrie Lukow, Renaissance Zone.
Steve Swantek, Renaissance Zone.
And so what we'll do now is we'll do the tax exempt minutes, then we'll do the Renaissance Zone minutes, and then for each of the items, we'll have the tax exempt, it'll be presented to us, but then both groups, especially if the Renaissance Zone is voting on an issue, then we'll vote on it. We'll both, and the questioning will be both going on at the same time. So anybody answer, you can ask questions if that's all right with anybody. And if you have any complaints, talk to the mayor. But that's kind of our plan. So with that, agenda item number 1 is approved tax exempt review committee meeting minutes of 1/22/2019. And if anybody's had a chance to review it, otherwise we'd accept a motion.
I do have a comment, Mr. Chairman, just a typo in the first sentence of the meeting minutes references November as opposed to the January meeting. So if we could make that correction, Ben, I would make a motion to approve the minutes.
We have a motion and a correction. Do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Now the Renaissance Zone.
We have the agenda before us, and we have minutes from the regular meeting of February 27th. Do I have a motion for approval if everyone has read those?
Move to approve the minutes of February 27th.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Okay, and now number 2, a tax increment financing application by Roars Development. And how we'll do this is we'll have the staff present first, then the representatives of the development, and then everyone can ask questions after that. Go ahead, Jim.
I think maybe briefly I'll go over just a couple things in our policies since it was, I think, last before your committee in January and adopted by City Commission in February. We're seeing 3 different types of requests for incentives. The first has to do with tax increment financing, which is now under the purview of the Tax Exempt Review Committee. That's the first application. The next several applications are requesting assistance from the pilot program. The pilot program, our new policy is to provide property tax exemptions for up to 15 years, with the first 5 years being up to 100%, and the following 10 years being up to a 90% exemption. And so you'll see applications that conform to that policy. And then finally, the Renaissance Zone program, that's been requested on several of these applications, both Renaissance Zone incentives and as well as the pilot. We blended those before, and this will be a good way to take a look at an application at the same time so that both boards are familiar with what the other board is considering. We have on the phone, I don't know if he's in yet, but one of the requirements of our new policy is that we have that but-for test from PFM, that financial review. I believe, I don't know, Matt, are you logged in, or? He'll be calling in, and we'll be able to answer any questions you might have on those reports if we don't have them in soon. So the first application is for the tax increment financing assistance for the Roars project. This is a little different than the pilot exemptions in that with tax increment financing, you're either getting 100% is being collected into the TIF. There's really nothing set up to take, 10% or 20%. And so the request from ROARS is for a 10-year, or a maximum of a 10-year tax increment financing note for eligible costs. The specific request is for $950,000 of TIF assistance. That assistance is limited to things like public facilities, land write-down, and demolition. The proposed project would get underway this fall. Would be completed in 2021, 2 years from now. The project would consist of 85 rental units and 7 townhomes. There would be a connection to the Newman Center project, some faith-based housing, although that would not be receiving any incentives. The tax increment financing, how that works is they would freeze the value of the block. Right now, the entire block is worth about $2.8 million. About $1.37 million of that is church property, and $1.55 million is ROAR's property. The financial review was sent out. The consultant did feel that the project would not proceed without the assistance. I do have, I guess, I'd like to get some direction from this committee and certainly from the City Commission on if we do create a tax increment financing district. There's really, I guess, 3 different options. The first would be to have the tax increment financing district just be on the ROAR's property. The increment would only come from that property, and it would be in a TIF note and would be returned to the developer. 100% would be returned to the developer, either up to a maximum of $950,000 or for 10 years. The second option would be to do the same, but include the entire block, and then take any tax increment from the faith-based housing or anything that was above what would be paid to ROARS, and use that to support neighborhood housing projects in the Roosevelt neighborhood. With that, the TIF district would be the entire block. The area of the activity could be most of the Roosevelt neighborhood. And then, of course, the third option is to not approve the TIF and not approve the assistance for the developer. So I don't know if, do we have Matt on?
Yes, we do.
Called in. Matt, do you have any comments on the but-for test? And if you could, maybe briefly explain what you look for in all 3 of these reports we'll be looking at today.
Did you hear that, Matt? All right, apparently not, so we'll move on, Jim.
Okay. Any questions for maybe Mr. Roars or Mr. Nygaard? Do you want to go to the other podium and just provide any other information, or if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Jim. Members of the Tax Exempt Review Committee, Jim Roars is with me, and Earl Wilhelm from the diocese, if you have any questions. Again, our request today is for the Roars portion. I just wanted to make that clear that we were looking for help in the development of lots 2 and 3, which would consist of 85 approximately market rate apartment buildings and 7 townhomes to be sold for sale to neighbors in that area in the $275,000 price range. So that is the project. You've probably all heard a lot about this project over the past 6 months, or maybe it's been longer than that. As we work through a lot of changes to accommodate the neighborhood needs, we've come down to this as something that has been accepted by both parties as a doable option. All objectives have been met. You've also probably seen the news release last evening on the groundbreaking for the Newman Center. I want to point out that we were not celebrating our groundbreaking on the development on lots 2 or 3 yesterday, but rather just celebrating the fact that the Newman Center had reached their goal and had started on their portion of the project. So just wanted to make sure everybody understood that. I guess I'll open it up for questions now.
Mayor Mahoney.
All right, are we going to take out all the blighted houses this fall?
Is there intent to clean up that block?
Yes, if this is approved on the tax increment, 100% of the block will be demolished and 100% of it will be under construction this year.
As the neighbors had said, there's some issues with the blighted areas
Yeah.
and some crime and
Well,
different
we've
things
had
going on.
some, since this has become public, we've had some terrible thievery and stuff going on in the abandoned homes. So, yeah, we're trying to keep a handle on that, but it's tough.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Kent?
Yes, Mr. Nygaard, could you clarify your debt financing plans? Because I noticed some discrepancy between the application. It says it's a $9.1 million 5-year LIBOR loan, but then in the due diligence report from our PFM consultant, it talks about a 30-year traditional loan.
Well, I think the 30-year refers to the amortization period. What we would typically do, and the financing hasn't been finalized yet, but we might get a 5-year term loan that would be 2 years interest only, and the balance of the loan would be amortized over 30 years. So that would be a typical setup. Now, sometimes they might amortize it over 28 years so that the total is 30 years, but that's the intent.
Okay, thank you. I just noticed that difference.
Commissioner Greenberg?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Back to Jim on the 3 scenarios he presented. Maybe if you could take a deeper dive with some of the information on item B that you presented. Some may recall, and I've said in past commission meetings that, to create a win-win, at least how I view it, is if we can create an opportunity with a TIF, and in this case with B, using the whole block, we can find some resources to put together to, work with the Roosevelt neighborhood, as well maybe moving some of the houses, and as well as some other options for, the things that have been discussed through the last 6 months in particular. So if there any additional information you can share on that from your perspective, Jim?
One of the things the TIF money is eligible for is acquisition and demolition of properties. And so, for instance, we might go 2 blocks over, use the money to acquire a dilapidated, rental house, tear it down and then make that available for a new house to be built, maybe Habitat for Humanity, maybe the home builders, maybe, just a private developer. So that we used to do that fairly regularly with the Neighborhood Revitalization Initiative. We have not had many funds in that recently, and so we've been not very active in trying to acquire and demolish homes in older neighborhoods and turn it around. So my thought was this could be an opportunity to get some money over the next 10 to 15 years to take on some of the projects like that, so that once the new development is up, we'd have an income stream that could then be used to pay for some activities like that would benefit the neighborhood. So in a sense, we try to replace a few of the owner-occupied homes that had been on this block maybe years and years ago.
So then just to add, Mr. Chairman, theoretically, then we could use the land trust as one of the vehicles for that. That could have additional city investment as well as the private sector or financial institutions to make such an endeavor more robust.
Yeah, I think if there was some other, city funds that could be used, whether it's NRI or, participation with some sort of a land trust, instead of selling a lot like we've done in the past, we could have it in a land trust and then have the home sold. We could even look at the feasibility of, trying to acquire one of those townhome lots that Roars would be selling and participate in that and try to put one of those into a land trust. We haven't gotten into detailed discussion on that, but that would be an option to consider.
And I believe PFM is on the line again. I just want to read just a couple of lines from the conclusion. It's on page 28. The developer will bear all the risk involved with the project, and the project concludes that the project would not be feasible without public assistance. So to me, they do a good job. I do appreciate having PFM evaluate this. That's their profession, and so for us to rely on them, that is a good thing. And if you're on the line, maybe Jim, if you want to help us with that.
I just got an email that he's having a hard time hearing us, so I don't know if we're having
All right.
technical difficulties here.
Very good. Any other questions from anybody? Jim?
Hey, Larry, I appreciate you clarifying the dates on the 2 components of the overall project, because that was going to be my first question. Because generally it's frowned upon if a project starts and then comes back and asks for financial. So I appreciate that clarification. On the site plan, what is anticipated to happen on the Lot 4? Is that potentially like future development for an additional town row house type of development?
Sure, good question, Jim. We have committed to building the 7 townhomes that are located on Lot 3, like you see in the diagram here. We're not sure about the demand for new housing in that price point in this neighborhood. It's something everybody speaks to frequently, like there's just an incredible demand, but we don't know if it's going to be there. So we left ourselves the option with Lot 4 to do up to 4 more townhomes. That property is owned by the diocese, but if we're successful with building the 7 townhomes, we could launch into another phase and build 4 more, but we're not committing to that right now.
Very good. Any other questions from anybody in the chat?
Thank you, Commissioner Epcorn. Mr. Nygaard, one of the big impacts we have obviously is your vacancy rate calculations. I understand the initial opening is going to be a bit tough to fill the first day, right? So when we extend out 5, 10, some amount of years at the 25, 20, 17, 13% vacancy rate, does anyone have, whether it's staff locally or you as a developer, have a good understanding what the vacancy rate is currently?
Well, yeah, we watch it regularly. I can report back that we have 3 large-scale student housing projects in the area. They're all full right now, 100% or close to it. So what we've found, Chad, is that if you build these and you design them properly and include the amenities that the students want, that they really do fill up with a good assurance. And also, you don't ever build these in a bubble. I mean, vacancy has been high, it's been low. You try to look at it over a 30-year span or so. So right now, we're experiencing more vacancy that's typical. But I think with the growth at NDSU, and we can talk to Dr. Bashani about that, but with the growth that's anticipated there and some of the success we've had with our other projects, we're real confident that a building in this location with the amenities we're going to provide, not to mention the fact that this will be the first of its kind with a faith-based influence that we have. We're really confident about its long-term viability.
And I think, sir, you and I agree, and that's why I'm sort of questioning the vacancy rate being the rate it is. It's 13%, and again, it's roughly $9,000 per 10% plus or minus. So if the project is just tipping and teetering on the scale of not making it, what happens when the vacancy rate's fully occupied, or it's 0, or it's 95? Do they need the money? And I'll be getting to that with our friends from Kilbourne as well, is when we start building these things in, we take as assumed they're going to have some percentage of vacancy, right? It goes with the nature of the beast. And if we're giving our neighbors dollars to friends and they don't need it because the building is full, should we look at this in 10 years and say, well, you're 100% occupied, clearly you don't need the money, you're cash flowing very comfortably. Does it go away?
Can I just correct you? We're not giving any money to them. We're deferring the tax collection on, that's what we're doing. We're not increasing anybody's taxes. We're not taking anybody's money. We're deferring taxes. Is that correct?
No. While we're not taking a dollar out of one person's pocket and handing it to another, there's obviously ongoing support that's needed by every property that we develop, every property that is developed.
They continue to pay taxes.
At the current level.
Right. So who are we taking money from? And where's the money? Let's say that we don't give the money to them, then where does it go?
As an example, so if we add 1,000 units in downtown, do those people need support that are living there? And who pays for that? Need additional police
answer
protection?
my question. Where's the money that we're supposedly giving them?
It's the money they'd be paying in
We're not
lieu
giving any money, Commissioner.
but we're not charging any money, Commissioner. There's additional staff and support that's needed.
Mr. Peterson, I might maybe correct you too, is that the vacancy initially is at a higher rate, but I think we do average out, at least on the projections I'm seeing, at an average vacancy of 6%, which is considered to be pretty normal conditions. So what you see is that rent-up period where we're not overly optimistic about how fast we can fill.
Yep.
So we do balance out over time.
Mayor Mahoney.
Dean Rashani, aren't they having trouble filling that one apartment building next to the shack? Isn't that part of the issue where we're trying to get people committed to come into that area?
Yeah, I would encourage you to throw that out as an anomalous situation. The building wasn't done on time, it was overpriced, some of the amenities still aren't completed. Probably more illustrative of student demand for housing would be the new 450-bed residence hall that we built on the west side of campus. That was designed to capture sophomores who wanted to live on campus but were being forced into the peripheral areas. That sold out in 2 weeks. It is completely full with a waiting list. There is a substantial demand from our students to live on or as proximal to campus as possible.
Any other questions? And I guess any other comments from the audience? If we have anybody that wants to make any comments, we want to welcome that too. Not being any, I would entertain a motion. And we have three, Jim, if you want to go through the options again, we'd appreciate that.
The first option would be to approve tax increment financing assistance, but as requested, but just limit the size of the TIF district to the property that Roars owns, including that lot 4 where the future townhomes would be. The second would be to approve the assistance that Roars was requested, but have a larger TIF, limit the TIF income that goes to Roars to what actually comes from their property, and then use the balance of the funds for neighborhood improvement projects that are eligible under a yet-to-be-written renewal plan. You know, we could extend that out, you know, to maybe 15 years. I'd look for your direction on that. And I guess the third option is to not approve the request.
How big of a geographic area would you be thinking about if we did something bigger than just the Roars specific site?
The TIF district itself would just be the block. However, the broader area, I look at the Roseville neighborhood, really everything from Broadway over to, you know, T-Lot, up to, I believe, about 15th Avenue North, down to 7th Avenue North on the south.
I guess I get to give my comments since I'm the chair. I would not be comfortable including the faith-based housing. I would rather just keep the TIF zone as tight as possible and just have the Roars development. I would not support expanding it and then also trying to have house buybacks and things like that. I'm in favor of keeping it as tight as possible and ending the TIF as soon as possible. That would be my, unfortunately, I can't make the motion, but that would be my motion if I could make one.
But on option number 2, it allows us to go into the neighborhood with TIF money. Isn't that right, Jim? Is that, if you do, if you do Commissioner Pepcorn's option 1, that just stays to the Roars property, right?
Correct.
And you're trying a new innovative thing of taking some of the TIF money and taking it back into the neighborhood to help rehabilitate the neighborhood. So it's the first time we'll ever have a TIF that theoretically would help the neighborhood get rid of blight.
We've done some scatter site TIFs in the past, but this would be the first one in probably 15 years.
Any other comments or questions?
I have a clarifying question. So do we have anything for option B that's the whole block, that's any parameters or anything written up other than the fact that we've just discussed it right now?
No, I don't have any parameters written up, but really the 3 things we can do is acquire property, demolish property, and public facilities. So it really would be for the acquisition and demolition of dilapidated properties. And some sort of other money would need to be needed for sort of a follow-up rebuild.
Once again, I get to give my comments because I'm the chairman. We're veering off and we're growing government. We got to focus on what we're trying to do, and that's it. This other stuff, that's not in our plan, and so that's just my editorial comment. But the TIF should be the TIF, and not all the rest of the stuff.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, while I think it's an interesting debate, I tend to agree with you to stick to the specific focus of the specific project, and I'm always a little uncomfortable about agreeing or approving a program where we might do something in the future over here. It's very vague, very undefined, and that just makes me a little nervous. And I would probably prefer to just keep it specific to the ROARS portion of this project here. Although it's an interesting debate that I wouldn't mind revisiting that in the future and coming up with some guidelines on that, so. I would make that motion to approve the TIF application specific to the ROARS zone properties on lot 2, 3, and 4.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? And I will add, so anybody that will want to comment on this, no matter how we vote, you'll have an opportunity to comment at the city commission meeting when the same issue comes up again. And so if you feel like you didn't get an opportunity today, you'll be able to have your chance at the commission meeting. Correct, Jim?
Correct.
All right, let's take the vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Number 3, staff summary of 3 pilot applications. And Jim, are you going to start us with that?
Yes, we'll go through them one by one. I'll note actually that the DFI Kessler, there's some issues with an existing TIF, so we're going to ask that that one be continued to your July meeting, but I'll cover the next 2. The first one is Great Plains Holdings, the request for a 15-year payment in lieu of taxes. Our policy is that you can ask for a maximum of 100% exemption for the first 5 years and up to 90% exemption for the following 10 years. This particular request is for less than that. The application is for 100% for the first 5 years, 90% for years 6 and 7, and then dropping by 10% a year through year 15. The proposed project would be an $11 million building with 68 apartments, 90 parking spaces, be a 4-story structure. They'd be looking at a fall start with a December of 2020 completion. This property now pays about $11,000 a year in property taxes. If we approve this exemption, even with a 90% exemption in year 6, those property tax revenue would increase to $25,000, so it would actually double in year 6, and so we'd start to see a relatively quickly, start to see a growth in the property taxes from this particular project, and so then it would grow by about $13,000 a year over the next 9 years. Mike Elmendinger from the Kilborn Group is here. Mike, I don't know if you want to have any comments, and I don't know, yet we're still having trouble getting Matt connected. I think he can hear, some of what we're saying. I think he may be able to make some comments, but I don't know, Matt, can you hear anything yet? Still having trouble with the system today.
Go ahead, Mike.
Yes, hello, committee and Renaissance Zone Authority. Jim, thanks for the summary of that project. I think that outlines, what we are envisioning for this project site. Again, it's 65 units. There'd be 90 parking spaces, and the total construction cost is the $12.1 million construction cost. So I guess I would just ask if there's any questions that you have.
Does anybody have any questions?
The financial review did indicate that this would not likely happen without the assistance. So
This one does involve demolition of the current property, is that right?
That's
Clearing of the
correct.
site. Yep.
Any questions? Well, we have a very quiet group. I had high expectations that we were going to be going on for a long time, but that's all right. For
I should
Commissioner,
know one other thing. With our new policy, in the past, we've actually allowed the property taxes to go down to 0 on the improvements, and with this program, they would continue to pay, even in the first 5 years, they would continue to pay the $11,000 existing property taxes, so there'd be no decline for the taxing jurisdictions.
any other comments or questions? So I guess, is this a 15-year, Jim? Is that correct?
Correct. 15-year total with 100% for the first 5 years and a phase out for the following 10 years. Ben had some comments.
I just might point out that the colored large spreadsheet that I provided, I think only the tax review committee members have that, is the calculations that we would do to amortize this or run the course of this. If you look at the first yellow pilot payment on the middle chart, that would be the actual payment schedule that you would approve. And the blue pilot and land tax. Land is fully taxable under this program. Only the buildings are 100% exempt and then pay the pilot. And I did provide you, as I have the last few of these, the scenario over on the top right chart, if the county would opt out of any part of this or all of it. There, some of the last that have been approved, the county opted out entirely on a couple of them, and from year 6 on a couple others. So the difference in pilot and land tax between the blue, if the county opts out on any of the years, you would look at the far right blue column on the top chart to see what the total pilot and land tax would be.
Ben, I have a question for you. If the county opts out, do they still get the benefit when the taxes are paid once it expires? That doesn't really seem fair, does it?
Well, they would get their full share of the tax from whatever year they opt out.
It's a rhetorical question. I was just trying to make a point. Yeah, I didn't mean for you to answer that. But any other questions? Mike, any other things you'd like to add?
Well, no, we have 3 projects here to go through. We're excited about all 3 of these projects, and you know, as we talk about vacancy rate, I think, Chad, your question about our vacancy rate, we do plan for higher vacancy rate in that first year until we stabilize, and then we have a 5% vacancy rate into our pro formas after that.
Mayor Mahoney.
Mike, a lot of people have said there's a lot of apartments downtown, you're getting too many, you don't have enough people to fill it. Who are you filling it with?
Well, we've not been experiencing high vacancy in our projects. They've been right around that, 92 to 96% that have been occupied. We come back to the overall community goal that was set in place by the In Focus plan that was created by the community and approved by the city about a year and a half ago, I believe, which sets a goal of having about 300 people moving to downtown Fargo per year, or maybe 400 people per year, and that would be about 300 units. And in context, there's about 1,500 units that have been built every year for about the last 15 years in this metro area. So that's about, that seems to be the appropriate amount for our downtown and that people want to live here. We have people, of a lot of diversity and a lot of different age groups. We have families living at Roco Garage and Woodrow. There's a Montessori school at Woodrow Wilson. We have young professionals. We have a few college students. We have empty nesters. There's a lot of diversity, living in these projects in downtown. The primary reason is that they are excited about living nearby our walkable downtown Fargo.
We were talking to Jim Gilmore the other day, talking about a parking ramp going up and the amount of workers coming downtown, and the evidence of different people coming in, block building in different areas. Mm-hmm. Jim said we could fill a 450 parking ramp for cars just of all the workers coming downtown. So I would assume what's happening is we are going to have a continued infusion of people downtown for the workforce.
Commissioner Peterson.
Thank you, Commissioner Pepcorn. A broad question sort of for everyone on both committees. At what time does the city say it's worked? At what time is it a success? One of the things I said in the first meeting we had in the Renaissance Zone meeting was we established the Renaissance Zone because no one wanted to build downtown. We wanted to incentivize and motivate people to be here because we knew long-term this was a good vision. We knew density is not a bad thing in all cases. It worked. It's worked so well, in fact, that we now have people that can't afford to build downtown. It's flipped. So here we stand with block after block of success, and we're still looking at giving people further incentives over large periods of years. I've advocated for the 5-year tax credits through the Renaissance Zone because there is a cost to doing business downtown. Mobilization is harder, meaning it's more time. There's infrastructure to get rid of and improve, meaning there's more cost. But when we're looking at 10 and 15 years of exemptions, be they partial exemptions or total exemptions, and I agree with what the previous crew said and what the Kilborn Group is saying. I think these buildings will fill. Maybe not 100%, because that's not realistic for any apartment building, but there's some percentage they will fill too, and you'll always have the 2 or 3 or whatever percent overturn. And I think that it will be quicker than we all believe. Do they really need 10 and 15 years of tax exemption? The interesting part of this is we had 2 commission meetings in a row, and I'm glad our assessor from Fargo's here. We had some people come before us and ask for tax exemptions or revaluations of their existing properties because they're not able to rent them at the rate they were, and they're not able to fill them at the rate they used to be. So we had apartment owners come before us and say, reduce my valuation because my cash flow is worse. The recommendation from the city was, yeah, we think it might be. For the first time in my 6 years, and I don't know, there's people been on elected committees much longer than I, for the first time in my years, we had someone recommend, because an owner's not making as much money as before, to reduce the valuation of the property. We're incentivizing more building in the core, which is not, again, a bad thing.
Do you have a question?
More of a statement, sir.
And Chad, I can
Because-
speak to that if I may a little bit as well. I know, I think that is a fair comment, and I know we did debate that in quite a bit of depth over the last few years when this tax exempt review committee, we had our own little focus groups and we revisited all of the policies. And that was a key point that we debated intensely. At what point do we pull the plug and just let the market handle it? And I think we debated that off and on at several focus groups. And part of that was, as Mike Almendinger referenced, the focus plan. And then at our group, we really came to the conclusion that we're not where we want to be yet with this downtown stuff, and that we would keep the pedal down for a few more years and see what happens and revisit that. It's a fair comment. I completely agree that there's a time and a place that we should debate when a program or an initiative has run its course and it's time to simply close the folder and move on. And I think it was consensus of this group, and I think the commission, that we weren't there yet.
I will add one thing. The Renaissance Zone, it's self-limiting. You can only have that project one time on a property, so you can't do it repetitively. And Jim, can you talk about, so part of our, in our bylaws is we have a number for what we want for housing for the downtown, correct? I don't know if you have that off the top of your head.
Maybe I'll have Nicole come up, and she might know that number off the top of her head. But yes, there is a goal to try to bring more people downtown. And
If you, Nicole, if you want to use that microphone right by you, I think it was 3,000 people, wasn't it? And the other thing I wanted to add is our downtown is what makes us unique. Downtown Fargo is what people see, and downtown Fargo, it takes continuous effort. It isn't like it's a done journey. When Mayor Furness started the downtown 25 years ago, there wasn't a lot going on. And Commissioner Grinberg, the Renaissance Zone, these things took a lot of effort, and we need to keep it going. It isn't like you just go, yeah, we're done, let's move on to the next thing. Downtown Fargo is what makes us special, not a strip mall. The South Fargo developments, they're beautiful. It's the same as Omaha, Minneapolis. Downtown Fargo is us. And if you think we can just stop and say, yeah, why are we doing this? That's what makes us special. Otherwise, we're the same as everybody else. So thank you for enjoying my sermon. But Nicole.
I think I might have lost your question in there, Commissioner Pepcorn.
The downtown, how many people, what was the number in our policy manual for the Tax Exempt Review Committee? We have a number.
Well, for the, I can't speak to the policy manual, but maybe the 2 tax exempt staff members, Jim and Ben, can, but I can speak to the downtown and focus plan. And basically, we're a third of the way there when we talk about jobs and households and what we have. You know, we might think we've had a lot of success, which we have, but we're both trying to achieve a destination and a neighborhood, and we have parts of both, but we don't have the whole. And so both, again, downtown and focus encouraged basically 3 times as many jobs and 3 times as many households, and we can do that in a number of different ways, and this is part, you know, what is in front of you today is part of the mix that we hope to see more of.
there's, Commissioner Grinberg sent me an article this morning. It was a recent Harvard study that just came out on kind of how changes in housing trends, and one of the trends is that in the people that are in the income group of over $75,000 a year household income, there's a higher percentage of them that are wanting to rent. and they're looking for nicer apartments. And so I think in some ways these apartments are meeting that demand of people who could probably buy a house, but they'd rather rent for whatever reason. And, they're looking for a nice apartment, not, something that it was real basic, built in the 1960s or 1970s.
Just one more thing, and I apologize for hogging the microphone, but I'm the chair, so that's the pleasure that I get to have. The developer will bear all the risks, so there is no risk to the taxpayers on this project. And once again, this project would not be built without assistance from us. And so one of the things is, so this is a 15-year, after 15 years, forever, and that's a mighty long time, that's what the tax rate is. So it's a small investment with huge economic impacts far beyond what these tax incentives are. Any other questions? Mr. Mayor.
Move to approve.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. The next three are with the Renaissance Zone involved in the voting, and so we will do the Nestor next. Is that correct, Jim?
Yes, I'll start this and talk about the tax exempt pilot portion of it, and then Nicole Crutchfield can come up or speak from there on the Renaissance Zone application. So this would be the former Nestor Bar, corner of 10th Street and NP, as well as the Park Company building would be redeveloped. There'd be about 5,500 square feet of commercial space, but the primary amount of space would be used for 160 units. I believe it's a 4-story building. There'd be 230 parking spots on site. The taxes at this point are about $22,000 a year, and so that would continue. Current value of the two properties is about $1.8 million. Again, it'd be a $25 million investment, so it's going to be a lot higher when it's completed. There'd be 2 phases. The project would start this fall. The first phase would be completed late in 2020, and the second phase would be early 2021. So the pilot request is basically the first 5 years would be Renaissance Zone. The next 10 years would be pilot with the 90% exemption, I believe the first 2 years, and then trailing down to a 10% exemption in year 15. Nicole, do you want to address the Renaissance Zone request? And then we can have some, I'd like to invite both committees to have some discussion or questions on this particular application.
This is the master, right? I confirm which Kilbourne project we're talking about. So yes, just to add to what Jim was mentioning, and typically as part of the Renaissance Zone meetings, we do have the applicant there to have most of the dialogue between the Renaissance Zone Authority. But again, just to confirm, this is in the Renaissance Zone Plan, Block 37. As we did our 5-year plan, the 2015 plan describes this block as appropriate for clearance and redevelopment of mixed use or commercial retail with ground floor interaction on 10th Street and NP Avenue. Housing on upper floors, definition of block corner shall be critical on this block. Staff believes this has been met as part of the proposal, and those that are familiar with the Renaissance Zone Authority, we do have a rating system out of 100 points, and we believe this project meets that 93 points, which is on par of average to Renaissance Zone projects. So with that, we'd be glad to answer any questions, or at this time, historically, we've deferred to dialogue between the Renaissance Zone Authority and the applicant themselves. And if it's helpful, I can pull up the packet, and if you want to look to any of the diagrams, just let us know.
Mike, do you want to talk about it first, and then if we have any questions, if that's okay with everybody? Do you have any? Go ahead.
Sure. So this project is on 10th Street and NP Avenue, and then we'll extend to First Avenue as well. So it's the largest project that we're presenting. It'd be 160 units. We'll have about 230 parking spaces. Some of them enclosed indoors, and some of them on surface parking lots. We're working hard to find a retail or a restaurant for the corner of that location. As you envision coming into, coming on 10th Street going north, come underneath that underpass right there. That's one of the key gateways to our downtown Fargo. So we'd like to be, highlighting that with this project. We're very excited about the project. Again, to answer the questions about the structure of how we are, what we're asking for from the incentive on this project, years 0 through 5 are we would pay the same taxes that we're paying now. And then, but we'd be paying $62,000 in year 6. So that's about 3 times as much as that's being paid right now. In year 10, it'd be about $181,000 that would be paid in year 10. So as we look at these projects and create a plan and what is the density and what's the right the right project for this location, the process that we have fulfilled, and again this was reviewed and created by the Tax Exempt Committee about 6 months ago, is that we have submitted all of our revenue and expenses for this project to the consultant. They have reviewed it and come back with the recommendation on, is this project feasible or not? And we know that we have to have the incentive. I'd like to express to everyone here that, out of the 24 projects that Kilborn Group has worked on in downtown Fargo, there's only been 3 previous ones where we've asked for a pilot or a TIF. We only do it when we need, that to move forward. So it's not on every project. These 3 here all need it. That's why we're here asking for it today. And it's critical to make them happen. There is a higher cost of building these projects in downtown Fargo, and there's a number of reasons that the costs are higher as well.
Very good. Any questions? Carrie.
Thank you. And maybe this is, Nicole, this is more of a question for you, but just a clarification on a staff comment. It said, and this would be number 5. And while the Renaissance Zone specifically calls out the definition of block corners are critical on this block, what staff is unsure of is the community's value of enhancement and its relationship of urban design and street activity. Is there a thought behind that comment? Or is it simply that it would be the west and somewhat of the northwest corners are already backed up to other buildings, so the activation wouldn't be there?
Yeah, I think it's just probably a little bit more information on behalf of the applicant in terms of what uses tend to be proposed on those street corners and activities. And so, again, if we use Roco as an example, we feel that's highly successful with the restaurants on the corners, the plaza space, things like that. We're still working on some of those design ideas or concepts with the applicant.
Because the activation on this one, Mike, would largely be NP. There'd be some 10th activity that's road facing, and then a little bit on the north side on First Avenue. And the back side of the building really is just truly a back side of the building. There's no activation planned on the back side of this project.
That's right. The back side of this building is adjacent to the existing alley that's there. So we would have a surface parking lot out there, and then that would be the back side. There will be an entrance to the retail space, whether that's a restaurant or a retailer in that location. Along NP Avenue, that's the street from the city's master plan that they want to maintain walkability there. So that is the reason we have the restaurant or retail in the corner. And then we do have walk-up units for the rest of the NP Avenue sites that promote walkability and more pedestrian friendly than having the typical interior hallway connected to the elevator only.
Okay, and just a follow-up to that. So there will be access available, would be from the northwest side or through the alley from the west side? I'm just thinking
Yes.
traffic along there.
That's correct. If you were driving to the retail location, you would drive to 11th Street and then enter and then park on the northwest side of this project and then walk in the northwest corner.
Thank you.
Steve?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, Mike, you mentioned about the 230 parking stalls. And correct me if I'm wrong, did you say how many would be underground parking?
Yes, there are, let me find it here. Let me ask a team member here if they know what that number is. How many are indoor versus outdoor? I think there's 55 outdoor parking spaces and the rest are indoor. Yeah, it's about 50. It's around 55 surface parking lots for surface parking spots.
Commissioner Greenberg?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and maybe Jim or Mike can comment. Help me understand, looking at the back page, I'm a little unclear. We're using Renaissance for 5 years and then pilot. Why are we doing that?
Well,
Because you could typically get the same outcome just with pilot.
You do. For the owner of the restaurant or a retailer in that location, they would be eligible for the Renaissance Zone benefit specific to their business. So when we have retail on the first floor, then we do utilize the Renaissance Zone for 5 years.
That was going to be your answer. I just wanted to make sure. It shouldn't, some of these applications have all that disclosed, because as time changes and people don't have the awareness or some of these things they're not very transparent in the application. But just a point of order, I guess, or thought.
Any other questions? Commissioner Peterson?
Thank you, Commissioner Epcorn. In regard to actually all your projects, have you guys done like traffic flow studies to make sure people can get in and out of these comfortably? I mean, we have some egress onto 2-lane roads that are controlled by stop signs. Has anybody looked at that? And maybe that's a staff level question, but when we obviously increase the density on roads that are a little bit tougher to flow through, who looks at that? And again, I'm for these projects, don't misunderstand the question.
Sure.
I'm absolutely for them, but.
Well, from what I understand, when we submit a project for a permit, that's when that review occurs. But maybe I would let Nicole or Jim answer that as well.
Yeah, correct. Regardless if this was part of this application process, all of the permit review would go through our site plan review process, and between communication with the applicant, city engineer, and planning department, we would coordinate those types of comments with the applicant. And I should say, maybe this is a good time to clarify, since there's so many people up here, is as part of the application process for the TIF and the Renaissance Zone, it should not be assumed they've received a building permit or that the building permit has received approval. They still need to meet downtown mixed-use standards and site plan review standards and any other associated entitlements as part of this process. This is simply just kind of the incentive component or the financial component, but that would go through all the normal entitlement process.
As part of that, in a relatively small project like this, they'll look at driveway location relative to, the other intersections. The Land Development Code does have a trigger for a traffic impact study, but all of these projects are far below those type of size projects. This isn't a truck stop or a Walmart.
Mr. Chairman, I'm assuming that the Renaissance Zone Authority will make this decision, so I would move that we approve this.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any other discussion on this? If none, roll call vote, please.
Pepcorn?
Not on the Renaissance Zone. Oh, I'm the liaison. I'm the liaison, so I'm not sure. Am I a voting member?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Well, I am.
Right.
I am moving.
No wonder you haven't been at the meetings.
Then I vote aye.
Mucho?
Yes.
Furnace?
Yes.
Swiatek?
Yes.
Peterson?
Yes.
Grinberg?
Aye.
Brashani?
Yes.
Mathern?
Aye.
Yes,
And
then we could
that
ask
is
the Tax Exempt
unanimous.
Review
Vote
Committee.
carries. Jim, did you have another comment
I was
on
going to
that?
say we could then get a recommendation from the Tax Exempt Review
And
Committee.
then
Sorry
we'll
to
turn it
interrupt.
back over to the tax committee.
So do we have any other questions from the tax exempt? Otherwise, we'll accept a motion from them.
I move to approve as stated.
And do we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Ben?
I was just going to make a clarification. The pilot schedule in the application, which is on page 51 of the tax review, and my calculations came out a little bit different. Their schedule is assuming a plan of the current taxes being paid continual, and there was a little bit of value missing from the current tax. So I just suggest that the motion should probably be, should include that we get together and work those numbers out before it gets to the city commission, that you're not just adopting what's in the packet.
With the higher taxes, that'd be
Well,
great.
that we do the calculation to make sure it's correct.
Appreciate that, Ben. We like every dollar we get.
I move to approve with review of the altered calculation.
Thank you. Do you have a second? Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carries. So we're going to continue the Kessler. So I apologize for the length of our meeting. This is the last item on our agenda. It's the Mercantile project. Jim?
We'll just have Nicole introduce that. The mercantile request is strictly for the Renaissance zone exemption, so.
It does. Go ahead,
So
Nicole.
which item are we on?
The Goodyear
Mercantile.
area, Mercantile.
So yes, this project is basically at 401 Broadway North and 410 and 412 Fifth Street North. And much of what we know as the former Goodyear service station and existing surface parking lot. What's being proposed here is a 6-story building, 105,000 square feet building with 370 structured parking stalls, and 11,000 square feet of ground floor and commercial, 100 apartments, and in addition, a for sale townhomes adjacent to the Great Northern Cycle to the north. This project will have a couple of phases, one related to the parking garage, and this, which is a public-private partnership with the city of Fargo, as well as phase 2 in mixed-use portion of the project. This is known as, originally in our Renaissance Zone plan, Block 3, and is identified as ideal for clearance and redevelopment to again reestablish the corners with multiple stories in height and ground level retail commercial activity on Fourth Avenue. And likewise with the other previous projects, we've ranked it pretty high in terms of scores. And let me just get to that number here.
94.
94. And then the one comment that staff does have, and recognizing it's part of the city property, is the design standards of the parking structure itself. And so just in keeping, I also staff the parking commission. They would like to see as much wrapped as possible. We know that's not necessarily always feasible. And so we think about that length of facade and how that interfaces with a public street in terms of that walk-up traffic. You know, on the Roco ramp, we're blessed, if you will, with the kind of perpendicular, so we're just seeing those driveways. We're seeing that longitudinal elevation that you see on the Block 9 project across from American Federal right now. Again, it's just a difference in scale, a difference in style, and so we ask specifically to the Renaissance Zone Authority your feedback in that discussion as your engagement with the Downtown in Focus Plan and the Renaissance Zone Authority. Staff has some concerns, but we also recognize resources are limited and appeal to the architecture of this as just trying to achieve the best they can with the resources they have. That might include some metal paneling or some sort of components. And they do reference in the diagrams that they'll be pursuing that as they do their further analysis and design. So with that, we do recommend approval, and I know Mike is here to represent any further information.
I have one question on the effect of Fifth Street on that. What's going to happen with that?
We do plan to, so all of these projects, all 3 Kilbourne projects include a part of the entitlement process, right-of-way vacation or alley vacations. And so all 3 of those are scheduled at the Planning Commission and City Commission public hearings. So Fifth Street, I believe right now we're looking at a right-of-way partial vacation, and so we would just narrow up the street to allow for a little bit more engagement activity on the sidewalks and trees and things like that, but at the same time, the full width isn't really needed right now, and so we'll probably be reducing that to allow the parking ramp to encroach in that existing right-of-way right now. But our plan is to keep that right-of-way and just narrow it up.
If Fifth Street is now about a 50-foot wide street, and so it'd be narrowed to about 32.
Okay. Mike, did you have some comments that you wanted to make to the group?
So maybe I'll just kind of visually walk us through this project. If you start on 4th Avenue and Broadway, this will be a 5-story building in that location. So first floor will be retail on all of Broadway, and then when you go down 4th Avenue, that will also be retail as well, retail or office space. All the floors above that will be multifamily apartments. The garage or the parking garage that the city of Fargo is considering to build in the middle of this, the entrance would be from 5th Street. And because of the design and the length of the garage, we do not have the ability to put apartments or multifamily along 5th Street because by the time you need a certain amount of length to put the garage in there and make that work with the interior ramps. So we're going to have a wrap on all the south side, on the Broadway side, and then we do foresee for sale condos on the north side of the site, right across from the entrance to Great Northern Bicycles.
Carrie, did you have a question? Go ahead.
Thank you. I have kind of three. One is, the first one is a comment. I like to see that there's some for sale townhomes incorporated into some of these projects, because I think the In Focus project talked about adding more housing than just rentals. So it is nice to see that. And as we look and see how long these incentives are needed or what those goals are, we talk a lot about rental properties, and I think we need to keep in mind that In Focus pointed out the need for some of those row houses or townhome for sale projects too. So that's more of a comment. The second question, Mike, is there any negative impact to the existing businesses around there, particularly on the north side with the bicycle company? Anything that's come up in discussion, or have you touched base with that owner?
I would say that we started with some concerns, but through a lot of dialogue and coordination with Tom, I think it's safe to say he is in 100% support of the project and primarily the design of this building and garage. We've worked through a number of iterations and design changes to think about how people and cars enter and leave the project, and specifically that garage. And then also what is right across the street from him. So he's actually, excited about the idea of having more people nearby and having people living nearby that piece, his entryway.
Good, that's nice to hear. The second, Nicole, and maybe I missed something here, but in the documentation that we have, it says the applicant is proposing to secure a pilot. Is that still correct, or is that incorrect?
That's not correct.
Okay. So maybe we need to just make that change in our documentation to reflect that on the Renaissance Zone. And just a comment, I'm sure, as with so many of your projects, maybe the art partnership is someone to touch base with on creating some type of nice facade on the side of that parking ramp, or incorporate some public art there. Would be something I would like to have discussed.
Sure. Well, we're certainly open to that. I think that's, the city would own the garage and operate that garage. So we're certainly open to any of those ideas.
Thank you, Carrie. Any other questions? If none, do I have a motion for approval or non-approval?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and second. Any further discussion? If none, roll call vote, please.
Luchow,
Yes.
Swiatek,
Yes.
Grinberg,
Aye.
Peterson,
Yes.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Furnace,
Yes.
Brashani,
Yes.
Mathern.
Aye. Motion carries, and I'm glad to hear that you've worked out things with Tom at Great Northern. I know initially he had concerns, so good job. And the next one was it tabled?
Yes.
Jim?
For Renaissance Zone, I think we'd like to continue.
I think
Is
for
that correct?
Renaissance, we're going to continue though, but the portion for tax has been tabled, right?
Yeah, I guess I would ask for the applicant to confirm that you
Okay.
want to,
You want to move forward with the
Kessler?
Kessler
Renaissance
project?
Zone?
Yeah, that would be great to do. And then we can follow up on the pilot application for that at a later date.
Sounds good. Did you have something to present on that,
Sure.
Nicole?
Just again, just to make sure we're all talking about the same property. This applicant is DFI Kessler LLC. It's new construction located at 617 and 621 First Avenue North and 624 Second Avenue North. One important clarification for the record, this portion of this property was previously approved as Renaissance Zone Project 250F at 624 Second Avenue North. We're canceling that project based on the expansion of this project, and so with support of this project today, we'll cancel that one and support this new application. With that being said, this is a project being proposed on Block 10, and a primary development strategy is to redevelopment the surface parking lots, and as proposed, the project will contribute to a number of goals and objectives that we believe supports the Renaissance Zone plan as well as the downtown in focus. The project itself is a mixed-use property, and it'll generate activity by replacing the surface parking lots with a combination of residential and commercial retail land uses. In total, it had 95 residential units, 13,000 square feet of commercial space, and 88 structured parking stalls. We gave this rating a 96 out of 100, and with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions, and Mike is also here with the Kilburn Group to address any comments you might have.
Did
you have anything you'd like to present on it, Mike?
Maybe I'll just visually kind of talk through this project as well. So this project, Kessler, is envisioned to be directly south of the existing Roco parking garage. So if you were to walk out of the back door alley of the black building, this is the surface park. It's now a surface parking lot in that location. We submitted an RFP to the city of Fargo to develop that particular location, and that was accepted, and we're fulfilling all the terms of that. I maybe if I could throw out a highlight here of what how the Roco project is doing from the public-private partnership that is in place. We're right now it is exceeding, kind of all the expectations that were put in place for that project. The original proposal for the project was $20 million between Roco and Kessler project to be of value built in that location. When the city was going to, the city did build the 450 parking stalls in that location. And the current construction is $31 million between two projects, and we're proposing another project here for Kessler, which would get it up to $51 million. So, we went from a project that, three different projects that we envisioned to be a total of $20 million, which will be $50 million. One of the reasons that we have been able to make that larger is because in the meantime, we have been able to acquire the surface parking lot that's, I'll describe it, directly west of that Avalon building. We call it the Stone Building. So that's been the new addition that we've been able to provide. So when we talk about the Renaissance Zone right now, that's that piece of land. So it would go from 2nd Avenue all the way to 1st Avenue. All of that surface parking lot there can be developed. And I would just note, because I've had this question before, the historic, what we call Stone Building, used to be the old Avalon. The historic Stone Building will be renovated as a part of this project.
Okay. Steve, go ahead.
Madam Chair, and this is maybe more for the city staff, but what are the plans as far as skywalks, skyways? I know, is there going to be one from this building over to the parking ramp? Or is there any discussion from the city on this as well?
No, we don't have any plans for that.
But is there one on Broadway from Block 9 across? There will be one there, is that correct?
There'll be a connection from the Block 9 parking garage directly into the Skyway, but they already are adjacent to each other. So I would not say just a connection to the existing Skyway. There's no new Skyway. So out of all of our projects, we are not proposing any new Skyways.
Anything further? Any other questions of Mike?
Madam Chair, I would move approval.
I second.
Have a motion and second. Any further discussion? If none, roll call vote, please.
Grinberg,
Here, aye.
Peterson,
Yes.
Pepcorn,
Aye.
Swiatek,
Yes.
Furnace,
Yes.
Luchow,
Yes.
Brashani,
Yes.
Mather.
Yes. Motion carries unanimously, and it'll be fun to watch this project. And I think you call for adjournment since you,
Do we have a motion to adjourn? And before we adjourn, I just want to thank everybody. This was a long meeting. We haven't met for a long time, and we try not to meet unless we have substance, but unfortunately, the substance all ended up happening at once. So, and I hope this was okay, having us meet combined, even though I think we get better feel and good questions, and even though Commissioner Peterson and I can go nose to nose a little bit, that's part of the fun, and I hope that's okay. I do apologize because the meeting did get too long, but other than that, I think it's a positive thing. So thank you, everybody, for coming. I apologize for the seating and all that. We got some things to iron out, but that's all right. Commissioner Peterson.
Commissioner Pepcorn, I think this is the way to do this, because again, I think part of the intent of this was to share between the committees, the commissions as well. And I'm going to end with this thought, because I didn't get to finish my thought before, Commissioner, is that I find it an interesting quandary that we're in right now, that the city will be asking their neighbors to reduce the rate of taxation, the level of valuation on existing apartment buildings, while at the same time incentivizing the construction of apartments that won't be paying taxes. And I get long-term. I understand there's a vision for Fargo, but there's a 15-year void in revenue that someone's going to have to make up, because we will need additional police. We will need additional fire protection. We will need additional infrastructure. That's the necessities that we have to have as a city to exist and a county to exist. There's a void. It's going to come from somewhere, and it's going to come from our neighbors. Thank you,
And with that lovely thought, do we have a move to adjourn?
I have just one quick comment.
How about a positive thought? That would-
Yes, a positive thought. When I look at the tax exemption committee and how we approach it, we're helping be a tool to the overall strategic plan of the city. And until that vision changes, I personally will vote in support of whatever makes movement in the forward progress of the city of Fargo. So I would love to have more conversation about if there are alternate views on what that vision should be and how it should look. But I think that needs to be a top-down approach so we're not fragmented and looking at what might be of benefit. So invite anyone to come to the tax exemption committee and talk about their perspective, so that we do have a good discussion and good dialogue. But up until this point, we have had little to no visitors on the aspect of alternate opinions other than the committee, and that's how we've been making decisions. So.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Move to adjourn.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody. That was great.